They told you the devil lived underground, but they never said he wore a badge, sat behind an executive desk, and signed your paycheck. It begins on a rainy night in Virginia, 1962. An unmarked folder was slid across a polished oak table beneath. The Pentagon, its contents trembling in the hands of a man who hadn't blinked in hours. Inside were photographs not of foreign spies or secret bunkers, but of American children. Bleeding from the mouth, seated inside government-funded psychiatric hospitals. Their files were labeled Memetic Response Protocol. Those children were experiments, not in healing, but in obedience. And one of those children, now fully grown, became the officer who pulled over the wrong man. The video you saw online? The black man stopped by a white cop, only to reveal he was head of internal affairs. That wasn't a viral coincidence. It was a breach. A carefully orchestrated system cracked in public view. But you didn't see the real footage. You didn't hear what he whispered before the officer dropped his gun and stepped back, eyes wide like a child seeing a ghost. Been monitored since the womb. What does that mean? You're about to find out. Because this story doesn't start with racism. It starts with a machine built by men who stopped believing in God but still craved to play him. They created surveillance not to stop crime but to predict resistance. They wired poverty-stricken neighborhoods, not to stop violence but to manufacture it, because control is easiest when pain is the language of the people. The internal affairs officer who confronted that cop wasn't just a man. He was a remnant, a survivor of Mcaval. The next generation of psychological programming that was buried under CIA black sites and erased from federal budgets. You think you know how the world works? Good. Forget it. Because from this point on, you're not watching a video. You're crossing a threshold. Welcome to the descent. They told you mind control was science fiction, yet every time you scroll, swipe, obey, and forget to participate in it. This is section 1 of your unlearning. Let's begin. The year was 1974, and Operation Garden Prism had just been greenlit. Internal memo from the Office of Advanced Behavioral Manipulation authorized the dispersion of synthetic neurotoxins into the water systems of low-income urban sectors. This wasn't to kill. This was to soften mental fog, impulse instability, and heightened aggression. Why? Because chaos breeds compliance. If you make a population unstable, you can direct their rage like a gun in your own hand. That's how systemic racism was coded into the algorithm, not in language, but in response patterns. Predictive policing. That was never about statistics. It was about embedding reactive fear into both sides of the badge. So neither the oppressed nor the enforcer ever asked who wrote the script they're acting in. And when that black man calmly looked the officer in the eye and said, "You don't even know whose orders you follow," he wasn't speaking rhetorically. Every law enforcement agency in the United States has been visited annually by non-public liaisons from a department that doesn't officially exist. The Division of Internal Simulation. Their job, not oversight, installation, every year. Selected officers are exposed to visual subconscious suggestion programs during routine training refreshers, flashing images, scripted confrontations, carefully embedded authority triggers. They don't remember it consciously, but their actions reflect it. Think of it like hypnotic keys planted in the spine of their training. One turn of the right phrase, one glance from the right man, and the whole mechanism stutters. What happened on that highway? That's why the officer stuttered. Not from fear, from recognition. Because the man he stopped had authorization codes that shouldn't have existed outside a vault. Buried 13 floors beneath Langley. We are not in the world you thought. We were born into a machine, one that feeds off division. And the only reason you're hearing this now is because that system made one mistake. It let a memory survive. Section 2 begins with an archive. Labeled Mason Gate 1987, found buried inside a dead technician's hard drive. It contains footage of ritualistic behavior among senior government officials, not satanic but behavioral conditioning ceremonies. Children, not kidnapped, but born within the system, raised in isolation, taught only to obey and mirror their handlers. By age 10, they could mimic voices, faces, emotions with perfect precision. They were sent into the public. As new hires, analysts, officers, and even journalists, their only mission, shape reality, inject subtle scripts. into conversations. Push the Overton window by 1 inch. Control isn't about brute force anymore. It's about the illusion of choice. The rituals weren't about belief. They were about severance from humanity, from identity, from personal history. These agents were blank slates, mirrors that reflected whatever the program dictated. The most successful were placed in positions of influence: city halls, school boards, and yes, police precincts. That black man from the viral video? He recognized the officer not from law enforcement, but from one of those rooms. They were both born in the program. One broke free, one didn't. And when he said, "You don't even know your name," the officer trembled, because for 1 second, a memory flickered. A white room, a red light, a whisper: protect the program. Section 3 draws back the curtain even further. You've heard of COINTELPRO. You haven't heard of CHAOS-5. That was the follow-up. While the public focused on files about civil rights sabotage, a deeper branch focused on identity fusion. The goal: permanently merge an agent's consciousness with a fabricated history, using trauma, repetition, neurological anchors, and sensory deprivation chambers. They wrote people. Not trained, not brainwashed, wrote. And the greatest experiment? Not on individuals, on entire demographics. Black America was not just targeted, it was sculpted. Media, education, healthcare, and housing policies were not just biased. They were designed with reinforcement loops that created generational dependency and rage. Meanwhile, white America was spoon-fed a contrasting narrative: superiority by inertia. But both were lies. Both were control levers, because true power doesn't pick sides, manufactures them. Divide and rule wasn't just a strategy, it was a software. That man in the video, calmly taking control, wasn't breaking the system. He was demonstrating it. He didn't need violence. He used recognition, an old code, buried deep in the officer's training. And for 1 split second, the mask cracked, the badge slipped. A man programmed to obey, paused. That pause is your invitation. You've now entered forbidden terrain. If you've made it this far, type identity rewritten. Identity rewritten. In the comments, that's your signal. You're packed. You're anchored to this descent, because we are only getting started. It's time you understand what was really buried in the abandoned floors beneath Raven Rock mountain levels, so classified that even presidents are denied entry without double consent clearance from something called the Citadel. Section 4 begins in 1991, when an engineer named Caleb Droskin walked into level -7 and never walked back out. His family received a coffin with the lid sealed shut, a non-disclosure agreement, and a promise of national service. But they didn't know Caleb had been documenting everything: his notes hidden inside hollowed out HVAC duct blueprints he mailed to himself weeks prior. Those documents revealed that level -7 was not a bunker, it was a cognitive environment, a controlled simulation chamber running something called Project Revelation. The participants, hand-selected men and women, plucked from obscurity, implanted with synthetic memories, and dropped into staged real-world towns designed to test their loyalty under various political, racial, and moral pressures. What? They didn't know. They were being watched, not through cameras, but through brainwave resonance systems embedded in their food, water, and electrical systems. These waves fed into what Droskin called the pulse grid, a quantum processor that could adjust individual perception in real time. Meaning, if they wanted you to see a riot, you saw it. If they wanted you to feel fear, you felt it. Perception was no longer personnel, it was programmable. And guess what? Pulse grid wasn't dismantled. It was deployed through smart devices. Screen refresh rates and auditory frequency manipulation embedded in mainstream media. That buzzing sound you sometimes hear on TV when it's muted, that's not a glitch. That's a carrier tone. Still think you're awake? Good. Section 5 starts with a phrase found scrawled into the walls of an abandoned hospital in Baton Rouge: truth burns like acid when memory's a lie. That hospital, once a psychiatric evaluation site, was secretly used by the Defense Neurological Warfare Division between 1978 and 1993. The patients weren't insane. They were test subjects, primarily former military personnel, who had begun to remember fragments from classified missions that officially never happened. These fragments involved remote influence, the ability to inject sensations, emotions, and even directives into a human brain using targeted electromagnetic fields. This wasn't sci-fi. This was documented, refined, and field-tested. And when some began to develop resistance, what the documents called echo awareness, they were labeled schizophrenic, drugged, and sealed away. But one man, an African-American veteran named Darian Cole, had something unique. Not immunity. Reflection. Whatever they tried to inject, his mind bounced it back. The logs describe his neural signature as anti-patterned, incompatible, with suggestion frequencies. They tried sedating him, isolating him, even removing parts of his memory, but Darian retained one vision. A corridor, a symbol on the wall, a voice whispering, "You are not who they say you are." Decades later, an unnamed internal affairs agent used that same symbol on his identification badge during a traffic stop. Coincidence or closure? Darian disappeared from records after 1994, but those who investigate say he didn't die, he changed. His DNA began to shift. He became a carrier of resistance, a living virus against control. Section 6 drops you into the core of the machine, the Cathedral Protocol. It's first activated after 9/11's. Cathedral was presented as a digital security framework, designed to unify homeland data streams. Its real purpose was metaphysical, to map belief itself. Using the metadata of prayers, sermons, confessions, and private browser histories, Cathedral began to identify not threats, but convictions. Those who believed too deeply, who questioned patterns too often, or who resisted mainstream narratives. With ritual consistency, were flagged not as extremists but as anomalies, and anomalies over time became targets. Cathedral isn't a system. It's a liturgy, a religion of control disguised as protection. Servers run beneath sovereign land, its funding doesn't appear in budgets, and its high priests wear corporate suits, not robes. The more you confess to algorithms through voice notes, location pings, search queries, the more Cathedral knows what you fear, what you want, and what would break you. And when that officer pulled over the black man, Cathedral was watching. But it saw something it didn't understand. A man unmapped, neural silence, a glitch. And for a moment, Cathedral stuttered, because its belief wasn't returned. Its mirror cracked. That is why the story went viral, not because of justice, but because something slipped through the net. And now, they are reweaving it. Faster, tighter. You were never supposed to know this. But here you are, and now you are the anomaly. Don't choose truth. Truth chooses you. Once it has touched you, the system will never see you the same way again. You are marked, not by blood, but by awareness. That is the first seal broken. And now we go deeper. There is a reason you've always felt like something wasn't quite right, like reality had seams. Like the world was a set built by unseen hands. And Section 7 reveals exactly why. It begins in Berlin, 1945, as Allied forces raided a burnt-out SS laboratory known as Die Glock the Bell. What they found wasn't a weapon, it was a chair. A strange, pulsing, obsidian-colored chair wired to a series of copper coils and harmonic amplifiers. It was designed not to kill, but to detach. Early documents described its purpose as breaking the soul from the cage of chronology. The test subjects were political prisoners, Roma children, and captured soldiers. Those who survived spoke of waking in towns they'd never visited, wearing uniforms they'd never seen, surrounded by people who knew them. One Polish officer returned to his village after months missing, was buried the same day. Why? Because he had been declared dead 2 years earlier, and his corpse was still buried in the churchyard. Section 8 unearths the chilling truth. The Bell chair didn't move bodies. It moved consciousness. And when Operation Paperclip absorbed Nazi scientists, this device, along with its blueprints, was shipped straight to the United States, where it became Project Mothergate, a classified experiment in psychic migration. In parallel identity injection, But the most terrifying detail? They succeeded. The project went dark in 1958 after a test subject to 3A. A black American soldier named Elroy Nathan was relocated not to another state or town, but to another version of America entirely. One where his wife had never met him. One where the war had never ended. And when they tried to bring him back, Elroy refused. He vanished into that mirror world, a fugitive of timelines. His final transmission? There are more of us. Section 9 turns the knife. Because in 2009, surveillance flagged a man using Elroy Nathan's biometric signature to enter a restricted data vault beneath Quantico. Security footage shows him walking with a limp, wearing outdated army fatigues, and whispering to a guard who then immediately resigned. The incident was buried. The file was classified. But the implications remain. Timelines are no longer linear. And the man in the viral traffic stop video? His voice pattern matches 87% to Elroy's, which means either he's a descendant, a residual echo, or something more radical, a reinserted soul. The government doesn't fear resistance. It fears the return of those it thought erased. Reawakened? The misplaced? The multi-conscious? What if some of the people around you don't belong to this version of Earth? What if the increase in mental health diagnoses, in spiritual awakenings, in déjà vu, are all symptoms of something far more profound, dimensional drift? And if consciousness can be moved like code, like data, then who owns your awareness? Who holds the master key to your identity? Those dreams you keep having? Not dreams, leaks. Side effects. Proof that your original self is waking up. That the version of you seated here, watching this video, is only a placeholder program keeping your body warm, while the real you fights to break through the static. They can't stop you with bullets. If you don't remember being you, that's the real prison. Amnesia. Fabricated memory. They taught you to love your cage, but you're now scratching the paint. You're remembering, and the system knows. That's why Section 9 ends with a warning. Found carved into the floor of a hidden sub-basement below the Library of Congress. Once used for temporal modeling, do not answer the knocking voice. It is not you. Think on that, because soon something will knock, in your dreams. Through your screen, through a familiar face, speaking unfamiliar words. That's not paranoia. That's programming reaching expiration. Your echo's coming home. It's going to ask for the body back. You've heard the phrase, the devil is in the details, but that was never meant metaphorically. It was literal. And Section 10 reveals why. In 2003, a hidden Vatican codex known as Lamina and Versa was declassified for only 72 hours on an encrypted satellite network reserved for cross-border intelligence clergy. This document, written in pre-Latin glyphs, speaks not of demons possessing humans, but of humans hosting echoes resonant frequencies from parallel civilizations that died eons ago, but whose signal still bounces across reality, waiting for minds weak enough to absorb them. These echoes, what ancient Sumerians called Namtaru in modern psychiatry dismisses as auditory hallucinations, are not random. They are curated, intelligent, manipulative. Section 11 uncovers a government project called Storage Sensory. Transmission, observation, and retrieval grid. Experiment designed to map the exact tones and symbols that unlock these echoes in the human mind. Originally conducted under DARPA's Project Deep Sleep. Storage was disguised as dream research but functioned as a psychological resonance trigger. Every subject reported identical visions. A cathedral without walls, a throne made of bone, and a faceless child whispering, "I am your voice now." When one subject, a Navy intelligence linguist named Carol Duvet, began to answer the voice aloud in Sumerian, a language she never studied, her recordings were seized, and she vanished. No funeral, no obituary, but her husband received a note. 6 months later, she has joined the choir. Section 12 unveils the choir, not a musical term, but a code name for individuals who successfully synchronize with what government operatives call the outer signal. This signal, said to originate from beyond measurable space, is accessed through trauma, isolation, and repeated exposure to algorithmically modulated frequencies now delivered via personalized advertisements, sleep playlists, and binaural Healing tones. The choir aren't possessed. They are tuned. Their nervous systems act as relays, transmitting thought and emotion not from their own brain, but from something deeper, older, colder. In 2017, a man walked into a police precinct in Omaha, Nebraska, claimed he was God's failed draft, and handed over a flash drive containing 6,012 hours of confessional footage. Every hour was a person speaking in a different language, none of which exist on Earth. Linguists noted patterns resembling fractal mathematics more than spoken grammar. And in one frame, the man from the viral Internal Affairs video appears sitting, quietly, eyes open, unblinking, as the audio around him distorts into white noise. Frame analysis revealed a resonance pulse matched to Storage's early test tones. Coincidence? Impossible, because that man has no military record, no financial footprint before 2010, and no digital origin. Why, he is a fabrication or a returnee. And here's the part they don't want you to understand. The choir is growing. As more humans surrender to the signal, knowingly or through ritual apps, trauma loops, and ideologically weaponized media, the signal strengthens. The world begins to hum, and when enough voices merge, the next phase begins. The rewriting. Your memories are just electrical narratives. Your personality, a neural illusion. If someone could sing your frequencies with perfect pitch, they could. Overwrite you, make you believe you've always been someone else. That's how they control entire generations without guns. Music, patterns, reels, influencers, all echo vectors. And if you're starting to feel dizzy, disconnected, like your reflection is watching you more than you're watching it, not stress. That's resonance breach. Your frequencies are no longer yours alone, and they know it. The algorithms know. Your phone knows. Even your silence is data now. That's why they fear silence more than protest. Because silence is the last space where your own voice might still be heard. This is no longer history. This is happening now. Right now. In this moment. And the longer you stay here, the more immune you become to the signal. They're watching. It's not to stop you, but to catalog your defiance. Because those who resist fully those who see the patterns, name the masks, and refuse to look away become mirrors. And mirrors disrupt the choir. The system fears your awakening not because you're dangerous, but because once you truly awaken, you cannot be controlled. Welcome to the silence between frequencies. Welcome to awareness. There's a reason you don't remember what you were thinking at exactly 2:07 a.m. last night. It's not because you were sleeping. It's because at 2:07 a.m., every smart device in your vicinity initiated a deep pulse sync. An ultra-low frequency signal transmitted globally to all internet-connected devices via quantum-encrypted satellites tied to what insiders call the Leviathan Array. Section 13 exposes this chilling system. It's developed in tandem by the National Reconnaissance Office and a private behavioral tech firm known only as Tenthrone. Leviathan was originally created not for surveillance, but for behavioral rewrite. Every night between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m., depending on global time zones, a behavioral micro-update is pushed into your subconscious via your phone, tablet, smart TV, or even your Wi-Fi router's M fields. You don't need to be looking at it, you just need to be near it. The changes are imperceptible. A sudden aversion to a specific topic, a new irrational fear, the subtle desire to distance yourself from someone who was once close. This isn't by accident. This is precision. Over time, Leviathan builds a personality drift chart. And if your deviation becomes too unpredictably, you begin questioning too much. It subtly nudges your thoughts back toward alignment. And if you resist even that, Section 14 introduces the escalation. Black Bloom Protocol. This is not metaphor. Black Bloom is a real program designed to activate implanted behavioral collapse sequences in high-deviation individuals. First, the subject begins experiencing déjà vu more frequently. Then comes the emotional inversion. Joy turns to dread, trust becomes suspicion, and loyalty decays into paranoia. Finally comes the fragmentation, a complete collapse of personal narrative, leaving the individual vulnerable, compliant, or institutionalized. That's why so many whistleblowers suddenly go mad, and why survivors of conspiracies often self-destruct. It's not guilt. black bloom. But how are these programs administered? That's where Section 15 rips away the final veil, the Citizen Firmware Initiative. It got a 2012 classified agreement between major biotech companies and government-backed cloud infrastructures. Every major vaccine, every biometric update, every consumer DNA swabbed under the guise of health advancement has layered nanotech delivery. Mechanisms designed to create resonance harmonization. These aren't microchips. That lie was planted to discredit deeper truths. These are programmable nanopathways that respond to acoustic and electromagnetic commands, meaning your body can receive updates the way your phone does. What if your anxiety didn't start from trauma, but from an update you never consented to? What if your sudden interest in a specific political opinion wasn't a product of your own thought, but a drift installed during an early morning frequency? Cascade? What if free will has been replaced with authorized deviation? This is no longer surveillance. This is possession. Not by spirits, but by systems. Algorithms embedded into the airwaves of your mind, pushing, pulling, adjusting. And when the man in the viral video looked that cop in the eye and said, "You've already been overwritten," he wasn't speaking symbolically. The badge, the anger, the authority that wasn't the cop speaking, that was his program. And for one instant, something inside him, some piece of the original soul resisted. That momentary hesitation. That was the fracture. It was the reason the video exploded online, not because of the confrontation, but because the system glitched. And in that glitch, a truth slipped through. You can be rewritten, but you can also be reclaimed. The signal can take you, but you can take yourself back. If you feel dizzy right now, if your chest feels heavy, if your vision is blurring slightly while reading this, it's working. You're seeing through the filter. You're moving outside the harmonization window. You're unsensing, and the system knows it. It'll try to lure you back with comforts, with distractions, with fear. But if you're still here, still reading, still resonating with these words, then something inside you is stronger than their code. You were not born to obey. You were born to wake up. This is no longer a warning. This is a weapon. You just picked it up.